Live stream audio test, 1, 2.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much. It's 6 o'clock. Welcome to this meeting of the Executive of North Somerset Council. I think it's quite a long time since we did one of these in the evening. Not quite prime time, but getting there. I'm Steve Bridger, leader of the council. I will ask my colleagues in a moment to introduce themselves. Just a few bits and pieces of housekeeping. I'd like to welcome everyone to this face-to-face meeting of the executive in the new council chamber. There is an option to join the meeting via Microsoft Teams for those councillors and officers who do not yet feel comfortable attending in person or who are unable to do so. They will be able to take part, but will not be in attendance formally. And if a member of the executive, I think we're all here actually, so that's not relevant. We're streaming today's meeting live on the internet, and a recorded version will be available to view within 48 hours on the North Somerset Council website or on the YouTube channel, and usually a lot less than 48 hours actually. Before I move to the formal agenda, just wanted to advise I would like to bring forward agenda item 11, which is the local plan item, to be the first substantive item, effectively item 9. We've got 4 public speakers, I think, this evening. This item 1 on the agenda, addresses by members of the public, who all are going to speak to the local plan, to that item on the agenda. So I'd like to first welcome Danica Priest, please. Danica, if you'd like to wander up.
Whenever I speak out about the importance of protecting nature, I always hear, but people need homes, which is frustrating because I am people, I don't own a home. They don't understand that we can build the homes we need while saving our green spaces. So much research has been done into this. The number of excess homes has increased over the past 20 years from 700,000 to 1.2 million, yet in that same time, prices have risen 181%. This proves that we can't simply build our way out of this. Housing, like wealth, is being hoarded. Until we address those underlying causes, things will only get worse. If we met government targets, we would use up our entire carbon budget on housing alone. We can't risk that. The UK does not have adequate protections for nature, so we have to be that protection. We can't depend on the current system to save our wildlife. All you have to do is look at what's happening with our sewage to see proof of this. We can't wait until the system gets fixed, because once these spaces are gone, they're gone forever. Even if we could build our way out of this, the property industry will never let that happen. The housing crisis is making them record-breaking profits. Taylor Wimpey has made more profits than BP and Shell over the past 12 months. Think about the kind of power that wealth affords you and how easy it is for them to control the narrative around the housing crisis. My dad worked in housing for over 40 years. I grew up around construction sites, which is how I knew I was being lied to by these developers immediately about the realities of habitat loss. Ecosystems are like historical artifacts. You can't replace them with something new. A recent study found that the majority of species mitigation proposals in planning applications were not based on any real-world evidence. That's really worrying. There are also factors that are left out of ecology plans. For example, 24% of people own cats. So if Taylor Wimpey builds 5,000 homes, that will add approximately 1,200 cats into a site that's near a rare bat breeding ground. Don't get me wrong, I'm a huge cat lover, but you can't say that that won't have a massive effect on the local bat and bird populations. I get that we don't want to leave ourselves open for appeals, but if we try to compromise by sacrificing Yanley, we risk losing a wildlife corridor while still being subject to speculative development. Last year, Bristol approved their highest amount of planning applications since 2007, but still failed their housing delivery test because these developers aren't building and we can't force them to. We're far more likely to fight unwanted development by taking a firm stance against greenbelt loss and backing amended targets with need-based evidence. As a regional rep for the Community Planning Alliance, I've seen campaigners successfully challenge similar greenbelt developments in their local plans. One of these proved developers' plan wasn't viable. Speaking of which, one line in the report for this meeting really struck me. The paragraph about climate change under section 3.6 says, the development industry raised concerns about the lack of viability evidence and how this might impact on delivery. So somehow, these developers are going to build a new train station, fund new schools and GPs, but they can't afford net zero policies? How does that work? I empathize with people in other wards who are passionate about saving their beloved spaces, but throwing us under the bus in Yanley isn't going to help them. We need to stick together and save all of our green spaces or lose them all. To anyone that isn't convinced, please come and see this space for yourself. We'd love to show you around. We want to work with you on this. We have an opportunity here to make a difference and stand up to an unjust system. The MP is already on board, so let's do this. Let's save our green belt.
Thank you, Danica. Thanks very much. Your comments are definitely noted. Normally what happens, they get passed to the relevant executive member, which is Councillor Mark Caniford, but obviously we'll be considering what you said under item 11, or new item 9, on this evening's agenda. I'd like to invite Harvey Lilly, please, to address the executive.
Good evening, all. I really want to encourage you tonight, you the executive, to make the right decision and to vote to exclude Greenbelt from the local plan. You tonight have an historic opportunity to have a positive impact on the local environment and on the fight to save the planet. It's that important. To retain green spaces for our mental health, to conserve valuable wildlife corridors, it goes on and on. If this plan goes ahead, all of that will be lost forever. And I have something here that might help you make your decisions. It's a letter that it's dated 30th of August, and it's from the current minister. I think he's still the current Minister of State for Levelling Up, Marcus Jones. And it's to Liam Fox. And he's talking here about the standard method for calculating housing need. Here's what he says. The standard method does not provide a housing target. Rather, it is used by councils to inform the preparation of their local plans. Councils decide their own housing requirements once they have considered their ability to meet their own needs in their area. This includes taking local circumstances and constraints, such as greenbelt and areas of outstanding natural beauty, into account. And also, I don't know if you saw Prime Minister's questions today, but Liz Truss, the new Prime Minister, said, not enough power is in the hands of local councillors at the moment, and it's too easy for local councils to be overruled by planning inspectors, and she asked the Secretary of State to look into this. So I hope you agree that this reinforces the conviction that Greenbelt cannot be taken for building, that it should be protected, it will be protected by this government, that housing numbers calculated by the standard method are not targets, and that therefore the use of pressure of housing numbers as an exceptional circumstances for building on Greenbelt does not apply. And particularly it does not apply in the case of North Somerset, with 40%, correct me if I'm wrong on this figure, with 40% Greenbelt and 30% area of outstanding natural beauty. The criteria for exceptional circumstances, the only criteria that you have for building on Greenbelt land, does not apply. And you know deep in your heart that if this Greenbelt goes, it won't just be 2,500 houses at Wood Spring Golf Course or 2,500 houses in Churchill or wherever. There's already a plan to build on Greenbelt in South Bristol and between South Bristol and Long Ashton, with Epic wanting to build their European headquarters here. It's bizarre. Just to remind you, Epic's new recruits will come from the universities. Their employees will come from outside the North Somerset area. So it won't benefit any of your voters, nor any of our fellow citizens. This plan, if passed, we believe, will ultimately see the concreting over of the Greenbelt from Dundry to Barrow Gurney and elsewhere in North Somerset, with these corporate builders' plans for thousands and thousands more houses. We know we need more housing, but keeping the Greenbelt in the plan won't solve the needs of local people like the young and first-time buyers and renters. Your own policy, voted for by you, declared a climate emergency in North Somerset and called for action. This plan, if it goes ahead in its form, will be adding to that climate emergency by massively increasing our carbon footprint, destroying wonderful biodiversity and massive areas of carbon capture. As Jody Mitchell said, they pave paradise and they put up a parking lot. You don't want that to be your legacy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Harvey. Likewise, your comments will be noted, and I'm sure we'll discuss them under item 9. Kathy Fagg, I'd like to invite Kathy to address the executive, please. Again, on the local plan.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak. I'm sure you've gathered by now that there's quite a few of us living at the eastern end of North Somerset who've got very strong feelings about the local green belt. And as chair of Long Ashton Parish Council, I've had a number of conversations with local residents. And what I've found is quite a range of views. And people do recognise, on the whole, the need for more housing. That isn't the issue. And I would say that in Long Ashton, we have already taken a number of new developments. And some of our recent estates are bigger than some of the villages in other parts of North Somerset. It works, and it works well, because the village is surrounded by green belt. And there is that breathing space around us that we enjoyed through COVID, and now that meant that it remained a good place to live, and we had a clear sense of identity. The trouble is, I can't explain to our residents now why there's a proposal on the table which would mean that the green belt around Long Ashton could be built on before brownfield sites elsewhere in North Somerset. And this is a real fear locally. We've already had Epic come and talk to the parish council twice about their enthusiasm for building a headquarters for up to 1,000 staff in the green belt. I've not seen any justification for that, but they are convinced that they will have that development, and that if this was the United States, they would have their spades in the soil now. So naturally, we are very concerned about that development. The other thing that has rung alarm bells locally is the response to the consultation from Taylor Wimpey, which said 2,500 houses, that's not enough. They're talking of at least double that, and possibly far more. And so the things that you heard from Harvey and Danica, that actually you could have suburbia from the park and ride through Ashton, through the valley, across to Backwell, and across to Dundry, and across to Barragurney. That really is the fear of people who live locally. And that resources and the value of the green belt provides, both in terms of carbon capture and also of recreation and mental health facilities, would be lost to us. One question that was asked at the public meeting that you held in Long Ashton was, if it's in the green belt, surely all the other developments that you've proposed have to happen first before people build on the green belt. And your planning officers were very clear and very correct in saying, actually, once the plan to build on the green belt is published, it's the developers who take the initiative. And they can build in the green belt even though there is brownfield land elsewhere. Now, I think you know as well as I do, we didn't deliver on the last housing numbers, and we won't. There's not the manpower, the people power, the resources to deliver on the next housing numbers. So we could end up with a ludicrous situation where there's green belt development that people are opposed to at the same time as there are perfectly good sites elsewhere. And therefore, I'll conclude now, I'm asking you, please think again and find a way forward that keeps the green belt green and allows development in other parts of North Somerset who need it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kathy. I'd like to invite Sarah Auld, please, to address the committee.
Good evening. I'm Sarah Alden. I am the chairman of Backwell Parish Council. My report is a little shorter. I'd like to make a statement regarding agenda item 11, now agenda item 9, the draft local plan. Members are aware of the very strong feelings and objections by Backwell residents to the current draft plan, particularly about the large numbers of new homes proposed for our village. You should also be very aware of the real anger throughout the village at the perceived illogicality and unfairness, which would increase the number of houses by over 70% and effectively turn our village into a town. One of the main drivers of the draft local plan strategy has been the intent to comply with national government policy of providing a minimum of housing supply numbers, largely based on a defective algorithm. It is now clear that the government intends to amend this strategy, with the likelihood of reducing the required number for North Somerset. Whilst the government's timetable for any change is unclear, this likely intent must be incorporated into the local plan thinking. The current draft plan proposes 1,100 new houses in our village in 2 large lumps, one of which is in Greenbelt. But this strategy could only be viable and acceptable if it was accompanied by significant infrastructure. We do not believe this matter has been adequately addressed, either in financial or technical terms. And without this detailed analysis, the plan cannot be declared viable. In particular, the cost and deliverability of a new road over Network Rail's land is highly questionable. The current draft no longer complies with the urban focus option, which was clearly favoured by the majority of residents in the extensive public consultation exercise. Why has there been such a change? There are comparatively more sustainable locations in the district which would be preferable for accommodating housing, and we do not believe these options have been comprehensively identified. Backwell is not full of NIMBYs. We recognise it's healthy for both the village and the district to plan for moderate growth over the next 15 years. We do have some suggestions on how this could be achieved within several small to medium-sized sites where deliverability can be more readily expected and achieved, albeit with a smaller total number of new homes, and we are willing to discuss these with officers. To summarise, Backwell is most unhappy with the section of the draft plan dealing with housing numbers. We consider the second bullet point option of paragraph 11.2 should be this meeting's preferred option, but we particularly request there should be a serious review of the sections dealing with proposed new housing in Backwell. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Sarah, and thank you to all our public speakers this evening. Your comments obviously have been well noted and are very relevant to the discussion we'll have later, or shortly, I should say. So thank you very much. Okay, moving on to agenda item 2, apologies for absence. There are none from the executive. Our chief executive, Joe Walker, is on leave, so obviously he's not here this evening. I think now is probably a good time, given that there's so many people in the room and I guess a few watching online or later. I'd like now ask my executive colleagues, I think, to introduce themselves, if that's okay, starting with you, Mike.
Thank you, Steve. My name is Mike Bell. I'm the Deputy Leader of the Council and the Executive Member for Adult Services, Health and Housing.
I am Councillor Mark Canniford and I'm the Executive Member for Place and Economy.
I'm Councillor Ashley Cartman. I'm the Executive Member for Finance and Corporate Services.
I'm Bridget Petty. I'm the Executive Member for the Climate Emergency, the Ecological Emergency, Engagement and Relations with Town and Parish Councils.
Hello, I am Councillor Catherine Gibbons. I'm the Executive Member for Children's Services, Lifelong Learning and Skills.
Hello, I'm Steve Hogg. I am the Executive Member for Highways and Transport.
Good evening. My name's Mike Solomon. I'm Executive Member for Neighbourhoods and Community Services.
Thank you very much indeed, colleagues. All present and correct, Nick? Yep. Moving on to trustee standing order number 37, which is agenda item 3, declarations of disposable pecuniary interests. Are there any, colleagues? No. Thank you. Item 4, minutes of the executive meeting from the 22nd of June this year. I'm assuming there are no comments or amendments, so I'll just look to a colleague to propose acceptance. Mike, thank you. And do I have a seconder? Catherine? Are we all in favour? Thank you very much indeed. I'll sign those in a second. Agenda item 5, non-executive councillors' addresses. I don't have any on my list, but I think, yeah, Councillor McQuillan, I'm happy for you to address us now. Over to you.
Thank you, Councillor Bridger. I will be brief. Just wanted to add my voice to others really on the local plan. I think the executive will rightly be being advised on a lot of risks at the moment in regarding the local plan and the risks of continuity and the risks of change. I just wanted to add my voice to the others already tonight to emphasise the opportunities for change, the opportunities to protect impacted communities who we've heard from so eloquently tonight, to prevent the creeping urbanisation at the edge of Bristol and the villages of North Somerset that will be impacted by that, the opportunity to work with the government that does seem to be changing direction on this issue, and to potentially work with an MP who I believe will work on this issue and put party politics to one side, an opportunity to prevent critical ecological corridors from being damaged by potential development, and most importantly, an opportunity to show we are a council that listens. I'll leave it there. Thank you very much for the opportunity to address you.
Thank you, Stuart. Terry, you wanted to also say something?
It's only just one small point. I know this is an executive decision, but I think really at the end of the day this ought to be going to full council on the basis that this plan really affects every one councillor and all of our wards. You can hear the strong feeling that everyone's got, and I think when you come to the final decision, I think it ought to go to full council. I know it doesn't have to, but I think that would be a good recommendation from the executive. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Porter. When we discuss the item local plan, I'll invite non-executive members to sort of talk to the item, and I think that's something we might cover, or you might want to. Well, your comments are noted, Terry. Anyway, any other comments from non-executive members? Don't think so. Thank you very much. Agenda item 6: matters referred to the executive and not dealt with elsewhere on this agenda. Thank you, Nick. Item 7, West of England sub-region items not dealt with elsewhere on this agenda.
Again, none of those, Chairman.
None of those either. Item 8 is the forward plan, so that's, I think, was published as a supplementary, so that's on the record and for noting. So unless, again, unless there are any questions, I'm looking for a signal from colleagues that they're all okay. Happy with the forward plan? Yeah, nodding. Okay, so item 11 on the agenda, local plan update following consultation on preferred options. I'd like to bring that item forward now, so it becomes new item 9, but I think to save confusion from this point on, I'll refer to the number that the items are on the agenda, otherwise I'll just get a bit of a pickle. Looking to Councillor Mark Canifer to present. Mark.
Thank you, Leader Steve. First of all, I would like to thank officers, especially Richard Kent and Michael Reap, for supporting, arranging, attending the meeting throughout the district, and there were a lot of them, but also to the residents, the businesses and the developers who've also been in and participated in the preferred options consultation. I would also very much like to thank the public speakers this evening, but in terms of the consultation, and that's partly why we're here to discuss tonight, 4,000 comments were received, and I'd like to thank all of those who made the effort to do that. Let's not beat about the bush. There are still very difficult decisions and conversations to have, but we must clearly take note of the responses of the preferred options consultation. Clearly, housing numbers are too high. even if we take expansion, demand into account, and not forgetting the data being used is 2014 and well out of date. 2018 data would indicate 15,000 homes over the same period would be the demand. After many conversations and a few grillings with my colleagues at some of the public meetings, and after careful consideration, I do think we need to consider our direction of travel on the local plan and investigate more options. It is essential that we get a local plan in place, which I know all councillors understand, but it must be an appropriate plan with the correct levels of development between 23 and 38, as we will be seeking further development further down the line in 2038. Of course, everyone understands the need for strategic policies regarding infrastructure, community, climate emergency, and the quality of construction. But where we do find it harder to agree is the location policies, and that is quite understandable. The sequential test, 3.13 in the report, has helped formulate the most sustainable approach to sites and gives us a clear evidence-based process to formulate a suite of locations. But the elephant in the room is the overall housing numbers and the constraints that we face: flood risks, areas of outstanding natural beauty, green belt and sensitive sites. Dr. Liam Fox MP is currently promising us a reduction in the imposed housing numbers. There is a new government and minister, and we must continue to put pressures on them to see a more sustainable housing allocation in North Somerset. It is important to say there will be huge pressure on sites if the government does not reduce its requirements. These are the proposed amendments and replacements to the recommendation I will make, Chairman, and I will look for a seconder. Refer this report to the Place, Policy and Scrutiny Panel to seek further input, if possible by the 30th September 22, and request that officers proceed to develop a revised local plan that recognises the constrained nature of North Somerset and identifies an appropriate scale of and location of development to offer greater protection to the green belt and sensitive sites, and seek legal advice, including advice on implication for the local plan timetable and the anticipated national reforms. Further evidence gathering, potentially including further consultation in order to prepare the strongest possible pre-submission draft plan. And 3, request a further report to inform executive on the policy and scrutiny input and officers to advise and progress. So I need a seconder for those 3 placements. And thank you. I finished there, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Caniford. First of all, I'm not sure if there are any officers who wish to make any comment at this point. Richard?
Chairman, only just say that certainly the report is setting out the consultation responses on the plan to date. It's still very much work in progress. We do understand that there are national reforms which are being debated in Parliament. We should have known more about that in the summer. Well, that was delayed during the Conservative Party leadership election, and we expect to hear more in due course. So certainly the points that Councillor Caniford has made are fair points, and certainly pick up on things that the public speakers referred to.
Thank you very much, Richard. Any other comments from non-executive members? Obviously, Terry, you made your comments about, very valid comments that, this has historically been an executive decision. Given that, a key part of the amended recommendations are to refer this to scrutiny, while additional work is done by officers. I'd like to just invite, reinforce really that all members, all councillors should really engage with that process over the next few weeks. It's incredibly important. Councillor Crawford-Hawley.
Thank you, Leader.
thank you, Councillor Caniford, for suggesting that you hand to me this poisoned chalice. I'll do my best to ensure a full, frank, forensic and hopefully further fruitful scrutiny of that which you are now proposing to pass to the panel. It won't be easy. We've already spent much time, both formally and informally, trying to work out how best we might accommodate that which is being forced upon us. Voracious vultures are gathered over the countryside, expecting sustenance for their shareholder nests. Government is in turmoil, unsure whether to press ahead with the much derided and publicly hated algorithmic formula for housing numbers. And I think we all await clarity from Number 10 and new ministers, rather than mere wind from certain members of Parliament. At the 2 hall-filled meetings which I chaired for executive colleagues and officers in Backwell and Long Ashton, the public were challengingly polite, understood the difficulties we face, but were deeply sceptical about our ability or even our desire to withstand government and developer pressure. Public doubt is being cast increasingly on both our ability and our integrity. Unfairly so, but I think understandably so. We echo our public's concern. We might even side with our local ratepayers, but against the might of the big boy barristers and the volume house builders, we are David fighting Goliath, and I'm not sure our sling will match that of the Old Testament. Yet there's a clear need for more housing at prices which can be afforded, be it for purchase or for rent, in settings which are both attractive and sustainable, and which relate meaningfully to the older settlements to which they are in theory attached, or, if so far removed from established centres of communal life, are designed such that a sense of emotional involvement with a new place is realised. But for this to happen, a place needs much more than mere houses. It should feel like home, a place where one really wants to be. You know, we British are not very good at converting bucolic pasture into urban idyll, and hereby rests the public dislike of what we're doing. The volume house builder is efficient at plucking and plonking, plucking a plan from the pattern book and plonking the results in a field, but creating a place of beauty from bricks and mortar, leaving humanity with that which might become a joy forever, full of delight and residual contentment, that goal remains an unrealised dream. Leader, I'll do what I can, and I hope to report back to you in October. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, John. Poetry, as usual. I think we've got a couple of councillors on Teams who wish to address the executive on this. So I'll first of all go to Councillor Richard Westwood. Rich.
Thanks, Leader Steve. Yeah, I'll tell you a little story. Back in the mid-90s, when I was a councillor on Leominster District Council, we were asked to make a decision on a former US Army hospital site, a huge site, which was valued or went for about 10 million quid. We went to have a look around it, and in the in the huts which were being used for a turkey farm, we could see on the beams, on the concrete beams supporting the roofs, Sir Alfred McAlpine. Okay, built in 1942, Sir Alfred McAlpine. The present day developer, the one who was coming forward to us, was the direct corporate descendant of Sir Alfred McAlpine. Their names were familiar to you, they were Taylor Wimpey. There you go. The point I want to make is that the big commercial developers have very extensive building schedules, very long corporate memories, and very, very deep pockets. I remind the executive and indeed the council that we will need cast iron guarantees from central government, not just mere wind, as my colleague John Crockford-Hawley put it. There you go. That's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Westwood. I'd like to call Councillor John Cato. John, you're next.
Thank you, Leader. I just wanted to say how much I appreciate the comments from the residents about the issues and the way they see things. I completely understand the feeling and emotions, and I'm with you in terms of the climate emergency and climate change agenda. I think it's really important that we do investigate this further and look to see what we can do, and recognise the challenges that are there as being laid out by Councillor John Crockford-Hawley as well. It's an extremely difficult thing to do, and how to balance this David and Goliath issue, really, which is going on right now. And I'm looking forward to seeing if central government will actually come out with some revisions and help out in terms of the climate emergency, which sadly I don't see a great deal of that happening right now, but we'll do what we can. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Terry, do you wanted to come back?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. This process started a long time ago, as the ones over the other side will realise. It started off with 14,000 houses, which was what we wanted, and the developers peeled against that. I sat at the inquiry where they brought in all of their stuff there, and they pushed it on, and eventually it went up to 18. Then they weren't happy with 18. They went to a judicial review, and it got pushed up to 21. Now, in the last administration, all of us supported that there would be no development in the Green Belt, none in the AONB. But as they keep pushing the numbers up, it does make this very challenging, because it doesn't leave a lot of North Somerset there, and there are going to be difficult decisions to make. But what I would just request is that every councillor has the opportunity to speak with the planning engineers about their own ward and what happens in it. You might not be able to change the situation, you may not want to change it, but if we're not seen to be consulting on this, then our residents, now I'm fortunate, our ward is only got a couple of thousand houses altogether that want to go into it compared to some of them. But those are still very active and very vocal, those residents, and we need to make sure that we've done the best as councillors we can for our own bit. So I would request that each councillor gets the opposite, each ward councillor gets the opposite to discuss with the planning engineers where we're going. But I realise that there are going to be lots of difficult decisions. And, Nigel tried, many times before in the last administration to get the numbers put down. And he gets vague promises, oh yes, we'll look at that. But it never happens, unfortunately. But as you say, we do have to come up with a report at the end, because it's all right to say we don't have to meet the numbers that we're eventually given, that the government wants. If we don't come up with that, then they won't adopt the plan. And then we don't have any control over planning at all. We'll have development going in areas we don't want. So we do have to get a plan. But I think we all realise it's going to be very challenging. And best of luck, John. You can use some of your poetry to persuade us to make the right decisions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Porter. I don't think there are any more hands up or requests to speak from non-executive members, so I'll turn to my exec colleagues. Mike Bell, I think, Mike, you had your hand up first.
Thank you, Steve. I really welcome the amendment, the amended recommendations that have been put forward by Mark Caniford, and I think it's trying to strike the right balance in terms of taking the time that we need to try and get it right, and to test the legal advice, and to test the colour of the government's money in terms of whether they are going to reform the guidance and the legislation, but also making clear that we do listen to the views that residents have put to us in the consultation on the preferred options. There are two big issues here, aren't there? The first is that North Somerset, by its very nature, is a constrained district, because actually, as we heard from the public speakers, and can I say thank you to all four of them, Danica, Harvey, Sarah and Kathy, lots of really good points, and it was very helpful to have you here contributing to the discussions. The fact is that we've got significant areas of Greenbelt, we've got significant areas of AONB, we've got a coastline, and we've got other geographic and sensitive sites. We've got significant infrastructure challenges around the district as well, which just don't give us loads of easy solutions in terms of how to meet the housing target. So I think it's really important that we do recognise that. And so that's problem number one. And our second problem is that we are obliged or challenged by government to follow this arbitrary national target, which is frankly based on nonsense. It's based on, you know, years-old figures which bear no relation to the actual need for growth in this community over the next 15 years. And as one of the speakers mentioned, you know, it's a never-ending thing as well, isn't it? There's no end to it, because once you've done it and you've produced your plan and you've set your targets, and all that will happen is all the worst ones that we don't want will get developed, and all the ones that we'd like to be developed won't be. And then we've got to do it all over again and find even more sites, because what do the big house builders, what do the developers, what do the landowners want? They want their easy money. They want to be able to develop land as quickly as possible to get the best return for their shareholders and for their investors and for themselves. And unfortunately, that doesn't then meet the needs of our community. So I'm really pleased to see this signal that we want to think again about that and to look at our options to get us in the best possible place for submitting a local plan. The only thing that I think we just have to be mindful of is that if we think that the words and the wind, as Councillor Crockford-Hawley put it, from government is going to blow favourably, I think we might be hoping against hope, really, because this government has been talking about this for 12 years, and the former Prime Minister, Mr Johnson, had a large majority and a clear manifesto commitment to reform housing policy and didn't do it and couldn't get it through Parliament because of the disagreements in his own party about how to deliver that. And I've got no real confidence that that situation is going to be any different, because unfortunately the government is trying to juggle conflicting interests itself, isn't it, at a national level? The interest and need to build homes, both from a point of view of providing for the population of the United Kingdom, but also from the point of view of stimulating the economy. And we've got a new Prime Minister that wants to go for growth and wants the economy booming and wants more jobs. And one of the most direct ways of achieving that is to build more homes and to build more roads and to build more infrastructure. And on the other hand, she's got many MPs, Liam Fox is one of them, who say, let's protect our sensitive sites, let's not go mad with the house building. So they've got a very difficult balancing act at national level as well. So I think we've got to press on, make the right decisions that we can locally, try and balance these conflicting demands, but not be afraid to say, look, we have got genuine constraints here in North Somerset and we cannot do everything.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks very much indeed. Councillor Catherine Gibbons. Catherine.
Thank you. I did actually write something out, unusually for me. I usually just wing it. But I will endeavour not to repeat the points that have been made so eloquently by some of our speakers. I just wanted to sort of take us back, and I'm loath to go into history with John Crockford-Hawley here, as he is so much more expert in that subject than I. But the Greenbelt is like the NHS. It's one of those things that was introduced by a transformative government post-war and has become part of the fabric of our society. We take it for granted. We take them both for granted. And at our peril, I would say. The aim of the Greenbelts that were created under the Town and Country Planning Act in 1947 was to contain towns, particularly London. And that's why new towns were built outside the Greenbelt. They weren't created as some kind of long-term land bank. They were about resisting the pressure to build. And throughout the life of the Greenbelts, there have been calls to reduce Greenbelt and allow building in that space. So should the Greenbelt still be protected? It might be hard, particularly for social reformers, to argue for that when we need to find sustainable living spaces for a growing population. But I believe that there are powerful arguments in favour of Greenbelts, in particular their role as open spaces, which was a 19th century terminology of open spaces for exercise, or green lungs for cities. And not all of the land is especially scenic. What's important is its undeveloped nature. Significantly, despite modern intensive agriculture, the Greenbelt is a wildlife resource. It remains vital for the ecosystem services that it provides for humanity and also for the natural world's intrinsic right to exist. In these times of climate change, it is essential that linked green areas are retained to provide corridors for animals and plants to migrate as their climatic niches move. So the ever-growing calls to build on the Greenbelt in order to solve every very real housing shortage are sometimes based on erroneous assumptions. New building doesn't have to be on greenfield. It can be on brownfield, which is less profitable but better for reuse. Responding to demand for housing by abandoning the Greenbelt is often an easy solution, which I wouldn't like us to see adopting. The Greenbelt may not have been turned out quite as it was planned, but it is used for urban recreation, and if protected, it will be of ever greater environmental value. Our position as the Labour group in this council has always been that we need to articulate our support to protect the Greenbelt, because we recognise that land is a public good, but not a common asset. In 1979, 20% of land was owned by the public sector, and today that has halved. Greenbelts protect 1/10 of our land and offer conservation to some of our natural environment. It provides access to the country, and constantly it's threatened by developments. We're keen that we are seen to mitigate those threats, but we are aware that building can and does take place on Greenbelt land, but permission is only as an exceptional circumstance, and as we know, it's a contentious and difficult issue when it happens, and it's subject to very rigorous processes, as is only right. Thus, excuse me, of course, we want to see increased housing numbers for people that need it, housing that reflects real local needs and delivers truly affordable homes where they are needed. I believe this amendment signals a clear policy approach to the Greenbelt and sensitive sites that are important nationally and also reflects the feelings of many of our communities. So I'm pleased to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Councillor Ash-Cartman. Ash.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Mark, for the amendment. I think that articulates really well that we have a really clear choice today. It's a choice that's actually quite simple. It's about whether we develop a local plan that meets our housing target, or whether we develop a local plan that says, no, we will not meet that target for the following reasons. Now, this is a choice that we didn't want to make. It's been forced upon us. We've not sought it, but we must make the choice, and we must be honest here. There are no easy solutions or risk-free options, and I think that's important to acknowledge. This is a very difficult thing to do. But it comes back to the housing number, doesn't it? It comes back to that arbitrary algorithm that we get given, and I think people have articulated really quite clearly the way the number changes over years, the way it's based on 2014 numbers, the way even by the government's own reading on these numbers, it is far surpassing what the local need is. The local need is actually a lot lower than the 20,000 houses that we are being requested to build. So we're not just building for people locally, we're building for others too. The report we've got in front of us, actually not just the motion, the report actually details the feedback we've had from residents, and that's really good. And I do want to say thank you to Richard and Michael, because they did come up to Long Ashton, and we've talked about, John, about that meeting. That was a fraught and difficult but polite meeting, and they were brilliant in that they came and did that and answered residents' questions, and that should be acknowledged, and for that I am grateful. But to me, the message from residents is actually really very clear, and actually it's quite a surprising one. They do want more houses. I mean, that is quite clear, and I do think that's shifted over the last 5 years. People acknowledge we want more houses, but there's some conditions, and the conditions are really what's important. What they say is they want them to be affordable, they want them to be decent, they want supporting infrastructure, and most importantly for us, they do not want them developed at the cost of the environment. They do not want us to build on the Greenbelt, to decimate our areas of outstanding natural beauty, and to provide homes for people that may flood in 20 years as sea level rises. To that it is quite simple. And that is the problem they're giving us to solve in this consultation. So how do we solve it? And you know, again, it comes back to our choice. It's not easy. But I think when we look at the debates that we've had as executive and with my colleagues, we do have an option here. And that option is to develop and adopt the point 2, which Mark says, which is a constrained approach. It's to say to the government that we cannot meet your housing target, and we are going to utilise something that already exists within your national planning policy framework, which says we do not have to meet it if we have certain circumstances. Now, I am not naive. I know that is not a risk-free approach, and I know colleagues have significant concerns, and I acknowledge that. But the point is we have to make a choice. We can either go down the easy route, the lower risk route perhaps, or we can go down the right route. We have two paths that are diverging, and I want to go down the hard, less trodden path, because I think that's going to make the difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cartman. Bridget, Councillor Bridget Petty.
Thank you. I appreciate the public speakers and those who stood up today, because I know that's not an easy thing to do. I appreciate what they came to say, and we were listening. I also appreciate what colleagues have said today, and that work of the officers to date, and the discussion and lively discussion we have had as councillors to try to find balance through this really difficult circumstances. I think between a rock and a hard place is an underestimation of how challenging this situation is. It is an important process to work up a local plan, to have policy that can give a direction on the type of housing, the quality of the housing, to take a level of control in a broken system dominated by the major house builders, as some of the public speakers referred to today. It's an important tool to promote action on climate change, and we really need every tool that we can, because right now we haven't got a government that is setting the right mandate on rapid, just action on climate change. The preferred options document that this report was about is part of the process. And now, to me, after this second consultation, it is time to ensure that we are listening to those concerns that have been raised. Thousands of people have commented. The executive member, Mark Caniford, kindly and generously came to Backwell to give his time, but he promised that this consultation was not a tick box exercise. And that matters. And we are elected members who are here to listen. And that is why we have to speak out. And that is why we have to go further. We do not have to follow the path that others are setting for us. We can keep our critical eye and our listening ear open to how to find a way through this difficult conversation. And no, it won't be without risk. But I welcome the amendments to this report, because there is still time to do something against the system and against the broken system and against the house builders. We do not have to stop now. We do not have to accept this broken system and the rules being put in front of us. I've said it before in public meetings, at executive meetings and at full council meetings, that to develop a plan that is not viable for our area is not good enough. And to be put pressure under these ridiculous housing numbers that do not reflect our housing need is not good enough. And our residents don't deserve that. North Somerset is constrained. It has Greenbelt that's worth protecting. It has areas of outstanding natural beauty that is worth protecting. And I will not put housing in a flooding zone, because we know, when we listen to our climate scientists, that that would be irresponsible behaviour to put housing there in the face of a climate emergency. So the Green group of councillors have been considering the target, and we feel it is too high. And a plan can be considered that really recognises the constraints we're under. I welcome additional work by officers to assist councillors in putting in front of inspectors a plan that we can all stand up to and commit to, that does not give up our residents, to be honest, and our landscape. As a Backwell councillor, I had to stand up and raise these concerns that disproportionate pressure on the village that I represent is too much, but it is about a system and it is a bit about a plan that the whole of our community can get behind. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Petty. Thanks, Bridget. Councillor Steve Hogg. Steve.
Thank you. It's been really amazing to listen to so many passionate words of wisdom from residents, from members and from my colleagues. And it is really difficult, I think, the choices in front of us. I don't think we can underestimate the elephant in the room, as Mark Caniford called it, the headline number. I just don't think we can dance around that or wish it away. The number at the moment is an immovable object right in the foreground, and we need to be, I think, going in with open eyes into this scrutiny session. I mean, I do support the amended motion, certainly, but I would ask that our scrutiny look really closely at the constrained approach. What I'm really worried about is the unintended consequences of what might seem on the surface of being a really good move in terms of taking the green belt out. I'm just worried, really worried, that we run a very real risk of basically achieving what we're seeking to prevent. And rather than being plan-led, we'll be developer-led. And look how many appeals that we've lost in our rural communities. I mean, we've got some very beautiful rural villages that don't happen to be in the Greenbelt, but they are just as special. And we've lost appeal after appeal, hand over fist. None of the mitigating reasons offered up to the inspector have washed. They've just simply batted it away and said, you can't demonstrate a 5-year housing supply. We're going to uphold it. And so I'm afraid that the developers are waiting with bated breath for this local authority to fail. Now, however this turns out, whatever plan we end up with, we will have to, it remains to be seen. But I think we need to be very much plan-led and not developer-led. I mean, if I just remind members, I mean, I've been a councillor now for 3.5 years. When I came in as a councillor, before you're elected as a councillor, you're kind of more of a campaigner locally. And I remember being very vocal about the garden village that was proposed in Churchill. And if you remember the garden village in Churchill, that was part of the much maligned JSP that was thrown out as being inadequate. But effectively, that did protect the Greenbelt. The garden village in Churchill wasn't going to touch the Greenbelt. It wasn't going to touch the flood areas. Somebody took a map, went, well, we can't build there because it's Greenbelt. We can't build there because it's floodplain. So we'll shove them all in Churchill and call it a garden village. So I think, the pressures are very real. And I think the public need to understand that we are really pushing an elephant up a hill here in terms of trying to accommodate the numbers. And we see and we listen to great speeches by our local MPs, and somebody's got a letter or an email, they've heard something mentioned in the House of Commons. There was a very interesting exchange between Liam Fox and Michael Gove. It's just nothing, it's just fluff. It won't come to anything substantive. Until it does, until it's written into policy, it doesn't mean anything. So I support the amended approach. I think we're all aligned as an executive. I think we all want the same thing, essentially. We want to protect our future communities from harm. But at the moment, we still have this enormous target, which I think at the moment, to me, seems insurmountable, no matter how hard we try. But, over to the scrutiny. And, also Councillor Porter's view about opening up to local ward members is really important. I think we do need as many people to be involved as possible. But, yeah, thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Hogg. I was going to say a few words, but I think Councillor Gregor, you missed your slot, but
am I allowed?
Fire away.
Am I allowed to intervene?
You are allowed to.
I am. Well, I come from deep in the green belt at Winford, and nobody I've heard tonight, obviously, has mentioned one silent but crucial element of wildlife in the green belt, and that's bats. Now, they can't speak out for themselves, so I'll have to do it for them, but they hate light, and they hate noise, and their feeding grounds can stretch for 10 miles or more. So I do plead with officers and councillors to remember that, because every time we insert 50 new houses into the green belt, or rip out lanes and hedges and put down tarmac, we're making things very, very difficult for bats. And as I say, they can't speak up for themselves, but with all the current importance of wildlife and the climate changes and so forth, we need to give them as much support as possible. That was all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Hugh. Yeah, I just wanted to, I wouldn't normally do this, but I just wanted to say a few words myself, because this is an incredibly important issue. I think it's really important to recognise that we've been working on the local plan for 3 years, probably over 3 years, and we pursued, I think, a measured, at every stage, a measured, evidenced, coordinated, sort of policy-driven approach to that work, and I thank John for that, for a lot of the work that he's done, because a lot of that has gone through the scrutiny process. I think we've had some really robust conversations in the last few days, weeks, haven't we, as an executive? There are some differences of interpretation of the evidence in front of us and the advice we've received. I think that's not a bad thing. I think that just demonstrates, I think you were saying, Ash, just how really hard this is. It's a big deal, and it's a hard thing, plan making. I think this is also evidenced in the report actually in front of us. So I think the report suggests that while there was broad agreement on the high-level principles, there was actually a wide range of views on how these could be interpreted in practice. Again, it's difficult. There are those who think our plan should do less. There are those who think our plan should, frankly, do more. I think we can probably all agree that we need to keep going, that we need to keep carry on planning, so to speak. If we don't do that, we'll just end up with the wrong kinds of development in the wrong places. So I think that's important. That we crack on. Not just that, but I think the new obviously we've got a new government, less than 24 hours old. The new Secretary of State is Simon Clarke. My understanding that he was quite supportive the last time we applied to join the combined authority. You can easily see if we dawdle, then we could be dragged into the combined authority strategic development strategy mess, frankly, and be forced to take more of Bristol's requirements. So again, it's another risk, and reinforces, I think, the argument we need to get our local plan to adoption as soon as we possibly can. It remains my view that the preferred options route gives the council the most protection while we seek to lobby, continue to lobby the government on the headline numbers, which we all agree is not only too high, but something that's been imposed on us. Of course, our direction, must be informed, should be informed by public consultation, and likewise, I'd like to thank everyone who spoke this evening, members of the public, everyone who participated in the most recent consultation and the previous ones. You all make very compelling arguments. My reading of the consultation response is that there wasn't particular preference to removing the development in the green belt compared to, for example, giving relief to some of the villages. So I think the wording in the report is there was a general recognition that the green belt should be considered last, and that the scale of development at villages and in the rural areas should be relatively less. So that's actually quite a difficult square to circle, isn't it? So for that reason, I'm particularly keen that we have an intense few weeks of scrutiny at all the approaches. I'm very happy that Councillor Crawford-Hawley has taken on the job. We obviously represent our wards. We also represent all the communities our council represents. We also need to remember that housing is not the only thing we plan for. Employment, investment, you know, it's all in there. It's all part of the local plan. And we need to give ourselves, I think, the best possible chance of reaching a broad agreement on how to proceed with it. Again, hence my desire to see this get more scrutiny. We need to get it right. If we make a misstep, it's frankly going to cost us money. The report already says that, you know, the cost of the local plan development process is, you know, it's nearly £500,000. So if we make a misstep, it could cost us more, and that's the pressure we don't need. But as I say, I absolutely support the amended recommendations put forward by Councillor Caniford, and I don't think that anyone else wants to speak. Yeah, Terry's got his hand up again. Is it brief, Terry?
Could I just ask one point? Perhaps Richard could enlighten us on this, but I think the situation is beginning to change now, because three of the recent applications in our ward, we actually, they didn't uphold the appeal. In actual fact, we won on the basis that it was damaging the character of the area. But the very last one that's come through now, I think it was in Yatton, in actual fact, the inspector said in that one, even though it damages the character of the area because of your low number of houses, then I'm going to grant it. So there is a change in there. You know, I don't know if you can outline that, Richard, but as I understand it, you know, I can see some of these ones that have been turned down recently coming back again now on the basis of what that last one, that last inspector said.
Yeah. Thank you, Terry. To be honest, I think these are points that we can make during the scrutiny process. So I think if it's okay, I'll move to Councillor Caniford to sum up.
Thank you, Chairman, and I'll just mention a couple of points. I mean, first of all, and I'm sure you do appreciate the cross-party and healthy debate that we've had, and it's astonishing that the cross-party, we seem to all feel the same things in slightly different ways, but all resulting in the same conclusions. We do, through scrutiny, have to make sure that all members are aware of that and all members can get very much involved, and I'm sure Councillor Crawford-Hawley will make sure it's the case, because what we don't want is people coming back saying they didn't have an opportunity. And to respond to Councillor Terry Porter, the final decision to adopt the local plan is that of full council, but there is no reason why we can't have the discussion about whether council can be involved at an earlier time. So I think we'll have that discussion outside this meeting, but yes, it's recognised. I think it's important that we do recognise the constraints, but we do need to get government and inspectorate to also recognise those constraints. And this is the test that we are given. I want to assure the public and the residents that their consultation and their comments mean something to us. We are listening, and I hope that the comments that have been made today show that in this administration. The whole administration, I believe, does listen and wants to respond where it can and where there are opportunities available to us. There is risk, there is no doubt about that. We do not have a 5-year supply, and we will get challenged on that, and there will be risk to properties. So the recommendations we have, I think, covers all our angles. It gives us the opportunity to continue if legal advice and the direction of travel is difficult to change, but we must try to do that, because clearly the residents have concern that we haven't considered that fully yet, and now we get the opportunity to do that as well. So I would be happy to go to the vote on that, Chairman.
Thank you, Mark. So you're proposing the amended recommendations. I think we already have a second. I think it was Bridget who seconded that. So all those in favour of the amended recommendations as put, so that's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed, colleagues. Thank you for the debate. Thank you again to the members of the public who spoke and addressed the committee. You don't need to stay for the rest of the meeting if you don't wish to, members of the public. But you can if you wish. So thank you very much. We will move on to item 9, the agenda item 9, which is the month for budget monitor. And I think, Ash, you wanted to take that in combination with item 10, which is the MTFP, medium-term financial plan, revenue budget forward look. So over to you.
Thank you, Steve. So this is, I'll take both together, as we've said, because they are very interlinked, and both really the theme that runs through both is the inordinate pressure the council's finances are under as a consequence of external events, I think, and I think we're all on that page. Rising inflation, ballooning energy costs, and when you align that with continued demand pressure for our services and a restriction on raising council tax to 2 or 3%, you can see the pressure that we're under. I'm not going to speak for long, but just to give a couple of figures, I think the shortfall in the current year on the budget for monitors is just under 5 million, and I think about half of that's just because of those external factors. And next year, for 23-24, it's looking at a 17 million gap. Now, we normally have a gap at this stage, but I think it's fair to say that's 2 or 3 times bigger than what it's been in the past. So definitely some challenges. I think what are we doing about it would be the thing that I'd just comment on. I think as an executive, we're all on the same page that acting early and decisively is really important, as you do with your own finances, where you seem to be struggling to make ends meet, and we're absolutely doing that. And I know colleagues are aware of everything's on the table at the moment, which is an awful thing to say, because none of us came here and got elected to be doing this, but we have to act prudently and responsibly. So that may mean, as one of the recommendations says, that we come back with an interim budget in November. We're still finalising the date, and that may be an option when we get there. But I'm happy to take questions or comments, or if Amy wants to add anything as well in terms of those reports. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ash. Amy, do you wish to speak to this item?
Thank you, Chair. Just to reiterate, of course, this is a very significant financial pressure we're experiencing both in year and in advance of budget setting. So where we are making clear actions as officers and making recommendations to the executive about what we can do in year against those pressures, and as you say, may need to make some early decisions about services coming forward in November. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amy, and thank you to you and to Mel and all the team for the work you've put into these papers. Much appreciated. Are there any comments from non-executive members? I don't think so. Any comments from colleagues? Councillor Steve Hogg. Steve.
Only one, and it's probably linked back to the previous item. Actually, is what additional pressure is being put on the budget if we have to rework the local plan. It's a rhetorical question. I know we can't answer it here, but I think it's something we need to think about, isn't it, in the round?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I know there are certain reserves, but we can't just spend those willy-nilly, and they do sometimes deal with planning appeals and the like, but you're absolutely right. We need to factor the implications of any decision we make in. I agree. Yeah.
Thank you. Steve, any other comments? Nope. Okay. Ash, you're proposing we're taking the 2 reports together. I think we can do that.
Yes, please.
Yeah, proposing the recommendations for both items. Does Ash have a seconder? Mark, thank you. All those in favour of the recommendations? Thank you very much. And we move on to item 12 on the published agenda, which is the Portishead Neighbourhood Plan, which is back to you, Mark.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm sorry about this, everyone. The Portishead Neighbourhood Plan is the 7th neighbourhood plan in North Somerset to reach the examination stage. It's the first to apply as a town rather than a parish, and the plan was submitted to North Somerset for examination by an independent examiner on the 8th of August. It has been prepared by the local community in Portishead under the authority of Portishead Town Council. It is a huge undertaking and represents a vast amount of work and commitment on behalf of the local community and the Town Council. Once a plan has finally been made, following the successful examination and referendum, the policies in the plan will have the same status as other plans prepared by North Somerset Council. The Neighbourhood Plan Group have decided to progress the plan under the core strategy, so the policies will be used for decision-making on planning applications, alongside North Somerset's core strategy. The development management plan and the site allocations will also be considered at that stage. The Town Council intend to undertake a review of the neighbourhood plan once North Somerset's local plan is adopted and to bring it in line with our new strategies and policies. The examiner will conclude on its merits of the neighbourhood plan, not North Somerset Council as we're aware. However, it is the role of this executive committee to agree the plan meets the necessary criteria for it to be able to go forward for examination. These criteria are set out in the report, and it concludes that they have all been met, meaning that the plan can now go forward for examination. This involves North Somerset Council undertaking a formal 6-week period of consultation on all comments, including North Somerset's comments, will be forwarded to the examiner. So North Somerset Council appoint the examiner with the agreement of the Town Council to move this forward. So I recommend accepting the proposal, Chairman.
Thank you, Mark. I'm not sure if there are any officer comments. No. Any non-exec member comments? Bridget.
I just wanted to give a short congratulations really on the quality of the document and the choice that Portishead Town Council chose to use the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals as a framework for their policy development on this. And I recognise their ambition and applaud their hard work on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Bridget. Seconded. And talking of seconded, Mark, you're proposing recommendations. Does Mark have a seconder? Bridget, thank you. All those in favour of the recommendations? Unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. Proceed to item 13 on the agenda, West of England Joint Committee membership and future working. Nick, we're deferring this item.
Chairman, I'd hoped to bring this report to the Executive today, but unfortunately, given absence of colleagues in various organisations over the summer, I've not had all the information I need to prepare that report for you, so I'm asking you to defer that to a future meeting.
Thank you, Nick. We will. So we'll move on to item 14, Q1 Performance Management Update, which this is an update report from the Head of Business Insight Policy and Partnerships. I know that Emma Diaki was unable to be here this evening, so I believe our Corporate Services Director, Amy, is going to present the report. Amy.
Thank you. So this is the first such report coming forward to the Executive and published in our papers. The report reflects information that's actually available on our website and updated quarterly alongside our business planning framework. So members of the public are able to see those updates ahead of them being dispatched to these papers. We are responding to our external auditor's request for making sure that the information is clearly in the public domain. So hopefully it will be accessible to lots of people, and the report is self-explanatory about where we are with progress against those corporate plan actions and how we record and monitor risk. But happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. I believe that Ash has a
I'd just like to comment, you know, when we started, we came up with 3 words, didn't we? Open, fair, green. And this one is about open for me. So I think it's really important, and I think it's open because there are things in there that are red, which is, well, it's not good, but it's good that they're in there, if you know what I mean. So I'd just like to comment on that and thanks Amy and the team for the report. Thank you. There's lots of green stuff too, lots of green stuff.
Bridget.
Well, I completely agree with Ash in saying that, you know, us being open with this data and this information is a really important and helpful step for anyone interested in what the Council is trying to achieve, which it does demonstrate how ambitious we're being with the to-do list. I still find that finding the executive documents, and for the public and for the people who are involved with Parish Council, they still find it hard to get to these documents. to find our executive papers, to find how to contact the right person at the council to request to speak. Unfortunately, there's still work to do, because already this week I had somebody say, I couldn't find the papers, couldn't find the contact details. And I know that it takes me about 7 or 8 journeys because I know how to get to it on our website. So just reflecting that while this document is great, I hope that more people can find it more easily, and I think we've still got work to do there. Thank you.
Thank you, Bridget. So I think the report is for noting. So just looking for some nods from colleagues. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Amy, and thank you, Emma. Moving on to item 15, oral reports from executive councillors. I won't go around the room, so I'm just looking for anyone who wants to put their hand up and say anything. I've got a couple of things. One is about Aaron, actually, who sat over there behind all the kit. So it's Aaron's last meeting. He's been sorting out all the live streaming for us for the past 12 months. He's leaving the council at the end of this month. He's going to do a PhD. So, Aaron, you'll end up with some much more impressive letters in front of your name that we have in front of ours, I think. So, respect and good luck with that, and thank you. We've also got a new government, haven't we? No, I'm not sure what to say, really. Politics is about choices, isn't it? And so a small number of people have made their choice, but I personally, I'm not expecting this government to make the right calls, but we'll have to see. But as I said earlier, the new Secretary of State is Simon Clarke, who we are acquainted with as a council previously. So I'm sure we'll be in touch with him shortly. Item 16, urgent business. Is there any, Nick? No urgent business, so thank you, colleagues. I declare the meeting closed.